So again, this is a set of notes dealing with the age of Jackson, and once again corresponding directly to Chapter 10, Faragher's Out of Many. It's a series of questions and answers I'm simply going to talk through that deal with the age of Jackson. This will be available on www.buschistory.net/YouTube as a separate Word file that you can use as you may need to reference events during the Jackson era. And I'm going to go through these question by question right now and discuss some in greater length and some in lesser length as necessary to make sure that the topic is clearly presented. Let's take a look. Chapter 10, Out of Many Study Guide, has some directions up here. If you want to remove the answers from these, once again it's a Word document, if you want to remove the answers from these and quiz yourself just on the questions, you're able to do that because it's not a protected document. Let's take a look. How did westward expansion begin to change the base of political power in the United States? As we went west, we expanded the amount of states we had. Territories became states. When they had 50,000 male voters, they could become a state. Prior regulations had been that men, had to own property in order to vote. Well, that would quickly cause a problem with westward expansion. What happened instead was, as we went west, voting rights were expanded in territories to allow more men to vote, which meant it could become a state quicker. So, as we went west, voting expanded kind of in a chicken and egg mentality, that the more people voting, the quicker we can become states, and the quicker we become states, the more people can vote. And it was called universal manhood suffrage. And it changed the power basis, because prior to universal manhood suffrage, the power base has simply been in the eastern part of the United States. Now we've introduced another power base out west. It doesn't dwarf the east, but it's simply another area of the country that needs to be contended with from a political point of view. Now we have 2 and 3. How did the extension of universal manhood suffrage affect the chance of women and free African Americans achieving the same right? Well, it destroyed it. It destroyed it because now that men had the right to vote, they weren't going to share it with women. Now it became a matter of sex. It wasn't qualification. It wasn't education. It was, what sex am I? Oh, I'm a male. I can vote. So every Plowshare and Billy Bob and Gus and everything out there, these guys that are turning over dirt, I'm not saying that they shouldn't vote. I'm not trying to say it at all. But it became a, yeehaw, I'm a guy, I can vote, as opposed to, I understand laws, and I understand the government, and I understand the issues. So it really decreased the chances for women getting the right to vote, for sure, and certainly blacks, because those people are not likely to give up a right that they feel is theirs simply based on their sex. Question number 3. How did Martin Van Buren explain the success of the new party system? With the advent of counting popular votes, it became much easier on a national level to see how people felt about different large ideological topics. And on a local level, it was even easier. You could have a town or a community with one group of people feeling one way and one group of people feeling another way. And they could have public debates, and there were forums for these debates, and people got into it. It was exciting. And Martin Van Buren thought that the excitement that came from being involved in this and this division over issues in the United States made the new party system very popular. He called it popular politics, allowed people to participate in local politics. And if you drive around today in small villages and towns throughout the United States, you'll see these little lawn signs with candidates' names on them or with issues and referendums on them, because people really are concerned with local issues more than national issues. Tip O'Neill, famous statesman for the United States, Speaker of the House of Representatives during the Reagan era, he had a famous quote that says, "All politics is local." It is. People care more about who's paving the road in front of their house than some major bill in Congress, in most cases. Popular politics. The corrupt bargain in the election of 1824. The corrupt bargain is alleged, by the way. It's never proven. The election of 1824 ends up in the House of Representatives because no candidate had a majority of the electoral votes. However, being the first election where the popular vote was counted, Andrew Jackson knew he was the clear winner, and he thought he deserved to be president. Quincy Adams thought he deserved to be president because he was Secretary of State. And we had established a series of events where Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, became president. James Madison, Secretary of State, became president. So he thought that as James Monroe, Secretary of State, he should become president as well, and he's going to be. But it's going to be because of some hijinks in the House of Representatives. Henry Clay was the Speaker of the House of Representatives. An election where no candidate has a clear majority of electoral votes is decided by the House of Representatives. And in this particular case, Henry Clay was more like Quincy Adams than he was like Andrew Jackson. As a matter of fact, Andrew Jackson didn't like Henry Clay very much, and now he's going to hate him. So behind closed doors in the House of Representatives, Henry Clay and Quincy Adams have a long discussion. Quincy Adams comes out with Henry Clay. Henry Clay gives a speech in which he says, I'm not going to be running for president. I'm going to let the House of Representatives decide this one between Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. And by the way, I urge my supporters to support Quincy Adams. Andrew Jackson goes, what? And Henry Clay supporters do just that. They support Quincy Adams. Quincy Adams becomes president. When Quincy Adams becomes president, Henry Clay becomes Secretary of State. Secretary of State had been established as the route to becoming President of the United States. And what happens? Andrew Jackson jumps up and down. This is a corrupt bargain. How can you do this? You've given away the election. I clearly won this election. Look at the popular vote. It didn't matter. Well, it did matter. Quincy Adams becomes president, and for the next 4 years, Andrew Jackson makes his life miserable. He makes it miserable by campaigning quietly, meaning he's on his porch, and all his supporters across the United States are doing everything they can to undermine the Adams presidency, and they do. And in 1828, Andrew Jackson gets his revenge when he trounces Quincy Adams. Andrew Jackson is supposed to characterize the age of the common man. How did he actually compare? Well, if the common man owned slaves, was a war hero, was a rich aristocrat from Tennessee, battled with the United States, and led the U.S. Army into Florida against the Indians and even provoked the Spanish, then you're the common man. Obviously, he wasn't the common man, but there was something about him that the common man wanted to be. They wanted to be the little guy who took on the establishment. And Andrew Jackson took on the federal government, and he made it his own in many ways. So, is he the common man? No. Does he characterize the ideals and the heart and the soul of the common man? Probably. To continue. Compare Daniel Webster, John C. Calhoun, and Henry Clay. Relate them to the idea of sectionalism. Well, all three were sectional leaders. Daniel Webster from the Northeast, John C. Calhoun from South Carolina and the South, and Henry Clay from the West. And they each had a different point of view. Daniel Webster believed in the strength of a strong national government, and he believed strongly in the Federalist ideas that had now been transformed to the Whig ideas. John C. Calhoun was a states' rights guy, and he championed the states' rights of the South. And Henry Clay was an American system, let's expand West idea. So if you had to put two of them together, you'd say Henry Clay was more like Daniel Webster, but Henry Clay's interest really had to do with westward expansion more than Daniel Webster's did. How does the spoils system relate to Andrew Jackson? Well, he fired 10% of the workforce. When he fired 10% of the workforce and replaced them with his own guys, well, that's how the spoils system relates. He believed that as the President of the United States, he had a right to do this, and that spoils system is going to continue all the way up until the 1880s, until the assassination of James A. Garfield. And that's going to cause a change in political appointments based on favors and friendship and nepotism. Compare Andrew Jackson's use of presidential power in the Maysville Road veto and the Indian Removal Acts. Both of those decisions showed a strong amount of power in the executive office. In Maysville Road, Jackson turned around and said, I'm going to veto this because I can. Because this is a states' rights thing. Because this is for Kentucky. So he's going to say he's pro-Kentucky and anti-federal interference in Kentucky, but he's really anti-Henry Clay. In terms of the Indian Removal Acts, he's going to be pro-states, again, because he believes the states should have the land the Indians are living on, and he's going to be anti-Supreme Court. So in both cases, even though the situations are different, he's showing he believes in the power of the presidency, for sure. What was Jackson's view of the power of the presidency? Well, he believed it directly affected the popular will, that he was doing what the people wanted. And the fact that he was re-elected in a landslide in 1832 proved that he was largely correct in that belief. What abomination was described in the essay Exposition and Protest by John C. Calhoun? And why was he so upset? Well, the abomination was the tariff of 1828. And he really believed, John C. Calhoun actually thought that Andrew Jackson would support him because it was unfair to tax the South at the benefit of the North. But what John C. Calhoun didn't bargain for was that Andrew Jackson had a long memory. And he remembered the discipline action in 1818, and he remembered that John C. Calhoun's wife was leading the Battle of the Petticoats against John O'Neaton's wife, Peggy Eaton O'Neill. And he also didn't like the fact that John C. Calhoun had written this thing anonymously, so he thought that John C. Calhoun was a bit of a coward. So that's what was going on there. And John C. Calhoun thought that Southern states could interpret laws to their own benefit, or all states could, and that became known as nullification. The Erie Canal, not directly connected to the Jackson presidency, but certainly part of the age of Jackson because it fueled part of his thinking. It was opened in 1824, connected the Hudson River, runs up this side of the United States, then we get the Erie Canal, crosses to the Great Lakes. Anyway, it was completely funded by New York State. And when we get to Maysville Road, Jackson uses that as evidence that states should handle their own infrastructure. It also opens up a lot of trade with the West, because once we get to the Great Lakes, we can go across all the Great Lakes, and we can also get to the Mississippi River. Erie Canal, absolutely, absolutely necessary and imperative in westward expansion. The Anti-Masonic Party. Basically, the Anti-Masonic Party starts in New York, and it was a brainchild of Martin Van Buren. And they were the first party to have nominating conventions, where different candidates from a party could get together, give their point of view on issues affecting that party, and the party would then choose one of them. And we still have those nominating conventions today. So you see they actually have a long-lasting effect. The Jackson controversy led to the Panic of 1837. It was called the Bank War. In 1832, Henry Clay is running for president against Andrew Jackson. And he does not believe that Andrew Jackson will defund the banks and close the banking system, because the banking system has been largely successful. Remember, Henry Clay was the architect of the American system, the banking system, integral to the American system, and we had expanded nicely. With the exception of the Panic of 1819, the banking system had done all right. Banking system would go through cycles. Henry Clay didn't bargain on Jackson having a long memory, and Jackson lost money in the Panic of 1819. And Jackson did not like Henry Clay, because of the corrupt bargain of 1824. And Henry Clay is now going to run for president in 1832. So Henry Clay and the president of the Bank of the United States, Nicholas Biddle, turn around and they say, we're going to ask Andrew Jackson to recharter the Bank of the United States. Charter is simply a license. And the banks had to have a license from the federal government to operate in the United States. On the 4th of July, Andrew Jackson had this bill on his desk to re-charter the Bank of the United States. It was 1832. Well, on the 4th of July in 1832, Andrew Jackson, with a brief statement, said something along the lines of, in light of the ideas this nation was founded upon, I hereby return this bill to where it began. Meaning, he vetoed it. Well, when he vetoed the Bank of the United States, Henry Clay couldn't believe it, but it was a miscalculation on Henry Clay and Nicholas Biddle's part. The bank was going to continue until 1836, so they had put it before him 4 years early, in which he could veto the bank and then create his own little soft landing. So after he vetoes the bank in 1832, he begins to defund the bank, to withdraw funds from it. But this didn't happen all at once. And it was a slow bleed, So it wasn't that the banking system collapsed in 1833 or 1834 or 1835. Funds were getting tight as funds were being withdrawn, but it wasn't until 1837 that we have the wholesale collapse of the banking system, called the Panic of 1837. And Jackson, he's no longer president. Martin Van Buren's president in 1837. So Martin Van Buren gets blamed for the bank failures that Andrew Jackson actually caused. The importance of the Hudson River School, completely different from what we've been talking about so far. The Hudson River School was a group of artists who painted the area around the Hudson River and New York State and New Jersey. And they painted an idealized, romanticized view of it. But what they really did is they cataloged it. They created a lasting image of what this part of the country looked like. And they also gave birth to a distinct form of American art, one that had not existed prior to the Hudson River School. Now you could say Native American art was here, and that's certainly true, but in those days it wasn't recognized as an American product. So the Hudson River School became the first organized group of American artists. And while their paintings were kind of romanticized and idealistic, they were also a catalog and a historical artifact of what the United States looked like in those days. John Tyler becoming President of the United States, what led to it? Well, William Henry Harrison and John Tyler ran for president in 1840 under the slogan of Tippecanoe and Tyler too. They were getting a war hero, William Henry Harrison. Andrew Jackson had been a war hero, so the Whigs thought that naming William Henry Harrison as the hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe would be a good strategy, and it was. And William Henry Harrison and John Tyler won in 1840, except William Henry Harrison died 3 weeks later. People say he died of pneumonia caused by a bellicose speech given during his inauguration 3 weeks earlier, because he wasn't wearing a hat, he wasn't wearing a coat, and it was cold and windy, and he was trying to show everyone how strong he was, and he rode there on his own horse. None of that matters. He still died. And John Tyler became the first president of the United States to ascend from the vice presidency, and the first president to ascend because of the death of a presidency. And the problem with John Tyler was not a Whig. John Tyler was more of a Jackson Democrat than he was a Whig. But the Democrats weren't going to support him because he ran as a Whig. And the Whigs quickly realized he wasn't one of them, so they didn't support him either. So John Tyler's presidency is doomed in much the way that Martin Van Buren's presidency had been doomed and Quincy Adams' presidency had been doomed. They all lived in the shadow of what had been the age of Jackson. These are some terms I think are important we need to know. Daniel Webster, he is the sectional leader from the Northeast, a strong senator from Massachusetts. Whigs, they are the second party system, or part of the second party system that arose as a result of the bank wars and the people who were against Jackson politics. Tippecanoe and Tyler too was simply a campaign slogan for William Henry Harrison that led to him being elected in 1840, and we know that didn't go so well because John Tyler becomes president. The Hydra Monster. The Hydra Monster is a vision. It's an imagery that's created by Andrew Jackson to talk about the many tentacles of the Bank of the United States kind of coming from everywhere as controlling society. And the Panic of 1837. Anytime you see the term panic in American history, it means some kind of economic failure based on problems in the banking system. There are many panics in American history. There are panics, there are recessions, and there are depressions. They're all related. Panic implies a run on the banks, and that did happen in 1837. As the banks were losing their money, people who had any money left were trying to get the money out of the federal banking system. The federal banking system had to recall loans that had money lent out for investment, so those people had to try to pay back money they did not have, and businesses collapsed, and people pretty much panicked. Very similar to what happened at the beginning of the Great Depression. A recession is an extended period of time. There isn't a panic, it's more of a slow bleed in which the economy is faltering. And a depression is simply a longer period of time than a recession. And it's also gauged by the severity of unemployment. So the Panic of 1837 occurs directly as a result of the shutting down of the national banking system that occurred directly as a result of the Bank War of 1832. So here we go. Here we are. We have two different presentations, if you want, on the age of Jackson. The PowerPoint presentation is presentation 1. and this presentation, the Noteset presentation too. Both are available on the Busch History website in the YouTube folder. Everything I use here is available in that folder, and they're listed as topic 7. We will continue with this series. Topic 8 will deal more with events in the 1840s and 1850s. So have a good day, everybody. From Busch History, take care. Bye.